Hey guys, welcome into the lodge. Let's talk about some rut terms and sayings and what they really mean in general, what they mean for you, what they mean for your property, your area, and your hunting experiences. What I find, guys, is this. I find that these terms that you hear of this time of the year, I find that a lot of people use them, but when in in-depth conversation that I go into with my clients or my past clients or future clients, I find all of a sudden folks don't really understand the term, the definition of the term for how that affects them. Just because the lockdown that we're going to talk about, number one here, guys, just because one person is experiencing this situation on lockdown doesn't mean that that's how it's affecting you. So we're going to dive right into this one, guys. The most overused, most misunderstood term or topic, I guess you could say, saying that you could say this time of the year, in my opinion, is the term lockdown. Lockdown, guys. So first and foremost, is there a lockdown? Yes, there is. But the term lockdown, guys, is very overused, and it's easy to pick that out and point a finger at that's why you're not experiencing the rut, right? Everything must be on lockdown. All the mature bucks are on lockdown. Nothing is up on their feet chasing does. Bad weather. I mean, it's a list of, stuff that is easy to grab onto that we can point fingers at. The lockdown is this, guys. What that term is that mature buck, any buck, but the mature bucks are locked down with does, meaning they're not going too far from them when those does are in that heat cycle. Well, something to always remember. Before you can really understand the lockdown, you have to understand what causes the lockdown, or what is that piece of the puzzle. That piece of the puzzle is all revolves around the doe's heat cycle. So that heat cycle, guys, or that time of the heat, not the heat cycle, but the heat time, is between 28 and 36 hours. Remember, only 12 to 18 hours, depending on who you talk to, only 12 to 18 hours of that is a standing heat. So in most cases, when you hear most folks talking about the lockdown and it's days on end, they're not seeing buck movement, it's not directly related to them just bedded up in a certain area and not wanting to move, not eating, not moving at all, and it's all focused on breeding. That's not the case, guys. My experience on both sides of the fence, if you will, would debunk that theory years ago, because I was able to really hone in more on that activity around those bedding areas and how the does, if it was a breeding facility situation or one of the ranches that actually had does natural breeding process that was taking place, let's say out in a ranch, I was able to watch those does and how they dictated the rut, or how they put themselves in what position during that time. What you'll find is this, guys, is the does are a lot like humans, right? If you're not feeling well, or in the female world, if there are changes going on with your body, you're not going to be as social, right? You want to be away from everybody. So these does that are in these doe social hub areas, or these doe pockets, let's say family groups, right? They don't want to be all involved with each other. You'll find that when it's that doe's time, and that mature buck has found her, what you'll find is they do that breeding like we've talked about before, guys. They do the breeding in the satellite areas. And it doesn't happen in the doe bedding areas, and it surely doesn't happen in the buck bedding areas. It happens in what we refer to as these satellite areas, right? So once the doe is in that 28 to 36 hour period, that mature buck pulls her away, or she pulls him away, right? That's a term. Well, the buck pulled her away and took her to a certain area. That's not the case. She's the one that led him there, right? Now, did he, kind of bird dog her into an area? Maybe, but that rule is hers, right? She is the one pulling that situation away. Guys, remember, the standing heat is only 12 to 18 hours. They're not going to miss feeding patterns like most people think. So they feed 5 times in a 24-hour period, 2 or 3 of which are internal of their bedding. So guys, 24-hour period, 5 times over a 24-hour period, 3 of which are internal of the bedding. Where are the other feedings taking place? She wants to move out to a green food source or a grains versus the browse. That's where she wants that to happen. Now, is she going to go out there with a bunch of the other does? No, but she still wants to do that. So why are you experiencing the lockdown? Here is the God's honest truth. You are experiencing a November lull. Now, there's going to be some naysayers on that and say that's not the truth. That is the truth. That is the God's honest truth. Now, it could be, I'm not saying that you are the one doing the pressure, but the more areas the areas that experience the lockdown the most are high pressure areas, because those does don't make it to the food sources. So you're already taking them out of the equation to begin with, right? You're already taking them out of the doe groups. So then it gets pushed back because of pressure. They don't make it out to there because that first doe group doesn't make it out there, and then they don't make it out there behind them, right? So it's this trickle effect that all goes within pressure. Now, like I said, you might not be the one doing it, but if you're in an area that has a long gun season, high pressure area to begin with, whether that's bow or gun, you're going to see more of that lockdown because they're just not making it to the most common area to sit, especially gun season, field edges. They're not going to be out there. You're not going to see it. But if you're in the right spot, you have a very high chance of seeing that movement still on their way out to food sources, rather than what most folks see is they don't make it to a field, so all the does must be on, or all the bucks must be on lockdown with the bucks. It doesn't happen that way, guys. It's a very short window to begin with, 28, 36 hours. You split that in half, 12 to 18 hours. It happens quick. It's done. What happens after that, guys, is when these mature bucks are very vulnerable, especially right now, this time of the year. They come off that heat. They come off that standing doe. They come off that breeding period. What you're going to find is the more mature bucks are going to start looking for these siestas, right? They go back to the bedding area, maybe their bedding area where they haven't been in 2 or 3 days now because they were with her, right? They were in that satellite bedding area. So they go back to make sure these immature bucks haven't, ran in on them, right? They go in. Here we go again. They only want to be there a short amount of time. The more pressure, the longer they're going to be there. So it all revolves around kind of knowing your property and what you have to offer. When these properties get built and these properties start experiencing they don't experience the lull or that long lockdown that everybody thinks that it really exists around the whole country. By designing the property that I designed, guys, that's one of the biggest things that I'm doing that for, is because instead of having on 40 or 80 acres, instead of having 2 areas that are habitat correct, we have multiple correct areas that are habitat correct. We have doe bedding areas, we have buck bedding areas, we have habitat pockets along the line of travel. The more opportunity that you can give these does when they release themselves from them doe social groups during this breeding process, what you're going to find is they have an opportunity to bed up in one of those habitat pockets. Well, if that habitat pocket that catches that is on your line of travel, the stand locations that I'm designing for you guys are between those habitat pockets and the food sources, or between the habitat pockets and other strong bedding sources. You're going to experience the movement where most folks aren't going to experience, because someone else in your area, someone else in that area, guys, is experiencing the mature buck following the doe. So that ties right into the number 2 topic here, guys. We are actually looking at the opportunity to have a second rut. What makes the second rut? So when you hear this slogan, second rut and peak and post, the second rut, guys, is all directly connected to what happened during the peak of the rut. It's also connected to what happened last year. To have a strong second rut, you have to have does that weren't bred in the first rut. You advance that back 28 days, or you advance it 28 days, not back, but you advance it forward 28 days from what your peak was. The majority of your does in the area were in that heat. You advance it 28 days. What you'll find is that's when you want to focus on the second rut opportunity. So if the peak of the rut in Michigan, November 7th, November 8th, November 9th, whenever that peak that you feel in your area because of your doe numbers, you advance that 28 days. I would highly recommend, usually, hopefully that falls around your muzzleloader hunt up there, right? Same thing here in Kentucky, the peak 15th, 16th, 17th of November. You advance that 28 days. Hopefully that falls during our muzzleloader hunt here during the second rut. That's what I've always said, guys, is those late season hunts, whether that's bow or the muzzleloader, can be very, very productive, because what you'll have is you have this next explosion of heat cycles that are all coming into the forefront, because your does from the first heat didn't get bred. Then you have the young does, the younger does that are coming into estrus for that second rut. It's their first estrus cycle sometimes, because they have to be the 6 months old, 7 months old before that heat cycle triggers, before they have a strong enough heat cycle that it could lead to being bred, right? So guys, what that all goes back to is this. I did a video last year on kind of a graph of that, and what you'll find is a lot of folks don't understand that these does come into heat every 28 days. Every 28 days, 12 months of the year. That heat cycle is brought stronger because of the less daylight. So the less daylight there is, that heat cycle is stronger. But if they are bred, let's say November 7th last year in the state of Michigan or the Midwest, let's say they were bred November 7th. Well, what that means is you take them, then they're bred, they don't experience their heat cycle. They are now in a gestation period for 200 days. Then they come out of that gestation period, have their fawns, then they go back into heat cycle. That heat, usually, that standing heat for them, usually 90% of the time, and I think a friend of mine up there in Michigan with some breeding facilities and stuff can attest to this, usually that heat cycle isn't on the same day. And the reason for that is, guys, it's all tied to like hogs, cattle, equine. It's all the same thing. It all depends on when they, like hogs, when they farrow. So the one thing that I always kind of get a chuckle of, guys, is we always hear these, the rut must be late, we didn't have a rut this year, the rut wasn't as strong as last year, all these excuses, right? Well, here is my goal, is because I experienced that years ago. Even when I was guiding, I fell into a trap of listening to kind of everybody else that wasn't seeing deer, and just blaming that on what, the rut must not be as strong. Well, the only way that your rut is going to change, drastically change throughout your area, especially your farm, is if the habitat changes, if the doe numbers change. Maybe EHD plays a factor in that, right? EHD doesn't only affect bucks, it affects deer, right? So maybe you lost a bunch of does. Maybe there was a lot of doe harvest done that maybe shouldn't have been done. Maybe you were a part of that, maybe you weren't. Those are the things that change the outcome of this year's rut. The biggest thing that I can help folks with is this, understanding those terms, those excuses. And I'm not saying you guys are making excuses at all. What I'm saying is it's used so often out there. A lot of us, it's very easy, guys, to just grab onto an excuse and say that's what must be happening. But if you dig deep into it, that's what this channel and my business is about, guys, is helping you dig into pointing the fingers more at yourself than pointing it at somebody else. If you want to take your property to the next level, if you want to have a property that you can experience the rut, you have to be very crucial of yourself. You have to be, willing to say you've done good, you've done wrong. When my clients deserve a pat on the back, I'm the first one that gives it to them. When my clients do a bonehead move, I'm going to be the first one that tells you that you pull the bonehead move. That's how we learn, right? That's how we gain knowledge, and that is exactly what the late or a no rut situation has on a lot of properties. Here is my final parting note here with you guys on this. You have to have, I've said this before, I'll say it 1,000 times again. If you don't have a property that your does, that your bucks can experience during the summer. Now, I'm not saying a summer only property. I'm saying have it so they can experience it. If your property, them deer in general, your bucks especially, cannot experience that property in the summer and they don't know how to dissect it, don't expect to have a great rut experience back to back to back to back every year or with multiple deer if new deer are coming into the area and it takes them days and days and days to figure this out. Where your most productive rut hunts are going to come is on a property that you have a balance. You have a summer property, you have a summer food program that because you're building soil, you're not making a doe factory, but you're allowing the does to be in those same areas because of your food. If your food isn't there, guys, your does are going to move. So if your does aren't there in the summer, your bucks aren't going to be there in the summer. Then the does move in. It takes them a while to get accustomed to where they need to be. Then the bucks, it's just this ripple effect of they cannot experience the property. So, like I said, am I saying build a summer property? No, I'm not. I'm saying let's build a blended property so you can experience all these phases, and these slogans don't really destroy your property. Those are three rut terms that are often thrown around that a lot of folks don't really dissect enough to really figure out what they exactly mean. Thanks, guys.